Moving up a weight class is one of the hardest things to evaluate in MMA. A fighter doesn't suddenly become less skilled, but every division places different physical demands on a fighter. The question isn't whether Kamaru Usman is still elite or not. The question is whether those same elite skills can create the same advantages against naturally bigger opponents. Answering that means understanding not just what Usman does well, but how those strengths interact with Dricus Du Plessis. That's the question we're answering today. Let's put it through the Fighter Index. Before we get into the scoring, first we need to understand each fighter's blueprint. This segment answers a simple question: who is this fighter when the cage door closes? We'll break down their archetype, signature weapons, strengths, and weaknesses to understand how they're built and what makes them dangerous. Dricus Du Plessis is an S-tier attrition specialist who overwhelms opponents through relentless pressure, physicality, and exhausting pace. Rather than relying on one dominant phase of the fight, he steadily forces opponents into uncomfortable positions, making them defend strikes, takedowns, clinch exchanges, and constant forward pressure. What makes Du Plessis elite is his ability to maintain that relentless style against a high level of competition, gradually wearing opponents down until their defensive discipline begins to break and opportunities for damage or finishes emerge. Kamaru Usman is an A-tier complete technician at middleweight, built around winning exchanges through disciplined, well-rounded fundamentals. He doesn't rely on one overwhelming weapon or a single phase of the fight. Instead, he blends striking, wrestling, clinch work, and defensive awareness to consistently make sound decisions and limit opponents' opportunities. While he embodied this archetype as an S-tier level during his welterweight championship run, the move to middleweight introduces new physical challenges and makes it more difficult to impose that same level of control against naturally larger opponents. Every fighter has an operating system. It's the underlying strategy that connects all their skills together and dictates the type of fight they're trying to create. The segment answers the question: how does each fighter naturally create success inside the cage? Dricus Du Plessis' operating system is built around overwhelming opponents through relentless pressure, physicality, and constant work. He wants every minute of the fight to demand something from his opponent, forcing them to defend strikes, wrestling, clinch exchanges, and at a pace that rarely lets them settle. As the fight progresses, those repeated demands begin to wear opponents down physically and mentally, creating the openings he needs to take over the fight. Kamaru Usman's operating system is built around controlling fights through disciplined, well-rounded technique and smart decision-making. He works to dictate where the fight takes place, blending striking, wrestling, and clinch work while limiting his opponent's opportunities to build momentum. Rather than chasing finishes, Usman steadily solves the problems in front of him, forcing opponents into low-percentage situations where his consistency and technical fundamentals can take control of the fight. Every operating system is powered by a set of weapons. These are the tools that a fighter relies on most when they're at their best. The better these tools function, the easier it becomes for them to create the type of fight they want. Dricus Du Plessis' first signature weapon is his lunging hooks. Du Plessis frequently crashes into range with looping punches, using their power and unpredictability to overwhelm opponents and force chaotic exchanges. While unconventional, they consistently create damage and help establish the relentless pressure that defines his style. His second signature weapon is his rugby-style takedowns. Rather than relying on traditional wrestling shots, Du Plessis often drives opponents backwards with explosive body locks and powerful tackles, using his physicality to force the fight to the mat. These entries allow him to establish control while keeping opponents on the defensive. His third signature weapon is his clinch work. Du Plessis is a thick boy, and he uses clinch work to wear opponents down with relentless pressure, forcing them to carry his weight while mixing in the short strikes, positional control, and takedown opportunities. It's a key part of the attritional style that gradually breaks opponents over the course of a fight. Kamaru Usman's first signature weapon is his double leg takedown. Usman uses explosive level changes and powerful drive to put opponents on the mat, allowing him to dictate where the fight takes place. Even when the takedown doesn't immediately succeed, it forces opponents to respect the threat, opening opportunities for his striking and clinch game. His second signature weapon is his shoulder strikes. While controlling opponents in the clinch, Usman frequently uses short, compact shoulder strikes to inflict damage without sacrificing position. They disrupt his opponent's rhythm, force constant defensive adjustments, and reinforce the grinding pressure that defines his game. His third signature weapon, and my favorite, are the foot stomps. While they may not be flashy, Usman consistently uses them in the clinch to inflict damage, disrupt his opponent's base, and make prolonged clinch exchanges increasingly uncomfortable. They perfectly complement his methodical, attritional approach by forcing opponents to carry his weight while steadily wearing them down. Every fighter has areas where they excel and areas where opponents look to exploit. The question is, where are they most dangerous and where are they most vulnerable? Dricus Du Plessis' biggest strength is his ability to overwhelm opponents through relentless pressure and physicality. He constantly forces opponents to defend strikes, clinch exchanges, wrestling attempts, and forward pressure, making it incredibly difficult for them to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Rather than allowing opponents time to think, Du Plessis forces them to make one defensive decision after another until mistakes begin to appear. What makes Du Plessis especially dangerous is his ability to blend every phase of MMA together. He seamlessly transitions between striking, clinch work, wrestling, and grappling, creating a relentless offensive cycle that keeps opponents reacting instead of dictating the fight themselves. That constant layering of threats makes it difficult for opponents to predict where the next attack is going to come from. As the fight progresses, Du Plessis becomes even more dangerous. His pace, pressure, and physicality steadily wear opponents down both mentally and physically, allowing him to capitalize on defensive lapses that often don't exist early in the fight. Few fighters are better at breaking opponents over time, which is exactly what makes him an S-tier attrition specialist. While Du Plessis' relentless style creates constant pressure, it also can leave defensive openings during his offensive entries. His willingness to charge forward and engage in chaotic exchanges sometimes exposes him to clean counters, particularly against disciplined technical strikers who remain composed under pressure. Du Plessis also relies heavily on momentum to maximize his offense. When opponents successfully maintain range, avoid extended clinch exchanges, and force him to repeatedly reset, they can disrupt the rhythm that fuels his relentless style. Slowing the pace limits his ability to build the cumulative pressure that makes him so effective. Even with those vulnerabilities, exploiting them consistently is far easier said than done. Du Plessis has repeatedly shown that he can absorb adversity, adjust throughout a fight, and continue applying pressure, which is why opponents often struggle to capitalize on the opportunities his aggressive style creates. Kamaru Usman's biggest strength is his complete technical skill set. He is one of the most fundamentally sound fighters in MMA, capable of seamlessly blending striking, wrestling, clinch work, and defensive awareness into a cohesive game. Rather than relying on one overwhelming weapon, Usman consistently makes smart decisions that allow him to dictate the pace and direction of the fight while minimizing unnecessary risks. What makes Usman especially effective is his ability to control opponents. Whether working behind his jab, pressing opponents against the fence, or mixing in his wrestling, he excels at limiting their opportunities while steadily creating advantages of his own. His composure and discipline force opponents to fight his fight instead of the one they want. Usman also brings championship-level experience and high fight IQ. Having spent years competing against the best welterweights in the world, he understands how to make adjustments, manage difficult moments, and execute game plans over the course of 5 rounds. That veteran experience remains one of the defining strengths of his game. If you know anything about this game, you know that Kamaru Usman doesn't have many weaknesses. The biggest question surrounding Usman is how well his game translates against naturally larger middleweights. While technique remains elite, giving up size and physicality can make it more difficult to impose the wrestling, clinch control, and positional dominance that define much of his success as welterweight. Usman's style also depends on controlling the tempo of the fight. Opponents who match his physicality, force prolonged high-output exchanges, or consistently deny his ability to establish control have had success disrupting the rhythm that allows him to dictate the action. Finally, this version of Usman carries considerably more mileage than the champion who dominated the welterweight division. Years of championship fights and elite competition have naturally raised questions about his durability, explosiveness, and ability to consistently perform at his previous peak, especially against larger opponents at middleweight. Now that we understand each fighter's blueprint, it's time to quantify it. The skill matrix answers one question: how do these fighters compare skill for skill? We'll score all 16 Fighter Index skills across 4 pillars to identify where the biggest advantages and vulnerabilities exist in the matchup. Fighter Index scores are measured on a scale from 1 to 10, where 5 represents a functional UFC level skill, 7 creates real advantages, and 10 represents a rare or generational ability. Let's start with Pillar 1, Fight IQ and Athletic Tools, where we'll compare the mental and physical tools that often determine who can execute a game plan over the course of a fight. By the end of this pillar, we'll see which fighter the Fighter Index believes has the advantage in this area. In Fight IQ, both fighters score a 9. In the Fighter Index, a 9 represents an elite skill that consistently creates advantages against top-level competition. Du Plessis repeatedly shown his exceptional ability to adapt and find solutions under pressure, while Usman's championship experience and disciplined decision-making have made him one of the smartest fighters of his generation. In athleticism, Du Plessis scores a 9, while Usman scores an 8. Du Plessis combines explosiveness, strength, speed, and relentless physicality into one of the division's most athletic profiles. Usman remains an outstanding athlete, but Father Time is starting to catch up, and that naturally reduces some of the athletic advantages he enjoyed during his welterweight title run. In stamina, both fighters score an 8. Both have repeatedly demonstrated the conditioning needed to maintain a demanding pace deep into fights, allowing them to compete effectively over 5 championship rounds without a significant drop in output. In resolve, both fighters score a 9. Both have consistently shown elite resilience against the highest levels of competition, demonstrating the ability to fight through adversity, make adjustments, and continue performing when momentum shifts against them. Overall, this is an exceptionally close pillar. Both fighters possess elite fight IQ, championship level resolve, and outstanding conditioning. The only meaningful separation comes in athleticism, where Du Plessis earns the edge. Because of that, Pillar 1 favors Dricus Du Plessis. Next is Pillar 2, striking and stand-up defense. This is where we'll compare each fighter's stand-up skills to see who the Fighter Index believes has the advantage before the fight reaches the mat. In striking, both fighters score an 8. Both have proven they can consistently create damage against elite competition, although they do so in very different ways. Du Plessis relies on unpredictability, pressure, and power, while Usman favors discipline, fundamentals, and technical boxing. In clinch, Usman scores a 9, while Du Plessis scores an 8. A 9 represents an elite skill that repeatedly creates advantages against top-level competition. Usman's ability to control opponents along the fence, mixing shoulder strikes and foot stomps, and dictate clinch exchanges has been one of the defining strengths of his championship career. In striking defense, Usman scores an 8, while Du Plessis scores a 7. Usman's disciplined defensive fundamentals allow him to avoid unnecessary damage and stay in position to execute his game plan. Du Plessis' defense is solid, but his aggressive offensive style naturally exposes him to more clean counters during exchanges. In chin, Du Plessis scores a 9 while Usman scores a 7. Du Plessis has repeatedly demonstrated the ability to absorb significant damage while continuing to pressure forward. Usman's shown good durability throughout his career, but at this stage, Du Plessis established himself as the more proven and reliable fighter when it comes to absorbing damage. Overall, this pillar is defined by contrasting approaches to the stand-up. Du Plessis brings the greater durability, but Usman's technical striking, clinch control, and defensive responsibility make him the more complete stand-up fighter. Because of that, Pillar 2 favors Kamaru Usman. Now we move to Pillar 3, grappling and control, where we compare each fighter's offensive grappling to see who the Fighter Index believes has the advantage when it comes to creating takedowns, establishing control, and threatening on the ground. In wrestling, Usman scores a 9 while Du Plessis scores an 8. Usman's wrestling credentials and ability to blend his takedowns into the rest of his game have made him one of the premier wrestlers of his generation. Du Plessis is a highly effective offensive wrestler in his own right, but Usman remains the more technically sound grappler. In takedown offense, both fighters score an 8. Both have demonstrated the ability to bring opponents to the mat against elite competition. Du Plessis often uses explosive body locks and rugby-style entries, while Usman relies on fundamentally sound chain wrestling and well-timed level changes to create opportunities. In top control, Usman scores a 9 while Du Plessis scores an 8. Once Usman establishes top control, he excels at controlling opponents, limiting scrambles, and steadily wearing them down with measured offense. Du Plessis is also an effective top player, but Usman's positional control has been one of the defining strengths of his championship career. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, both fighters score a 7. Both possess well-rounded submission skills and understand how to attack and defend on the mat, but neither relies on pure Jiu-Jitsu as the centerpiece of their offensive game. Instead, their grappling success is built around using submissions to complement their wrestling and positional control. Overall, both fighters are dangerous offensive grapplers, but Usman's elite wrestling and top control create the clearest separation in this pillar. Because of that, Pillar 3 favors Kamaru Usman. Finally, we come to Pillar 4, defense, scrambles, and ground survival, where we'll compare each fighter's defensive grappling to see where the Fighter Index believes has the advantage when defending takedowns, surviving on the ground, and winning scrambles. In takedown defense, Usman scores a 10, while Du Plessis scores an 8. In the Fighter Index, a 10 represents a rare or generational skill, and Usman has repeatedly demonstrated that level of takedown defense throughout his career. His elite balance, defensive awareness, and ability to shut down wrestling attacks have made him one of the most difficult fighters in MMA to put on the mat. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu defense, both fighters score an 8. Both have shown excellent submission awareness and the composure to defend dangerous grappling situations, making defensive Jiu-Jitsu a clear strength for each fighter. And off the back, Du Plessis scores a 7, while Usman scores a 6. Neither fighter wants to spend extended periods fighting from their back, but Du Plessis has displayed a greater ability to create scrambles, work back to his feet, and remain offensively active when forced into disadvantageous positions. In scrambles, both fighters score an 8. Each fighter possesses the awareness, athleticism, and urgency to navigate transitional grappling exchanges, allowing them to recover position, escape danger, or capitalize on opportunities before opponents can establish control. Overall, both fighters are exceptionally difficult to control on the ground, and neither offers many opportunities once grappling exchanges begin. The biggest point of separation is Usman's rare takedown defense, giving him the advantage in that area that defines this pillar. Because of that, Pillar 4 favors Kamaru Usman. Now it's time to answer a different question. Who is the more complete fighter overall? The Fighter Index Composite Score is calculated directly from the 16 skill scores we just analyzed across all 4 pillars. It's important to remember that this isn't a prediction model. The composite score measures overall completeness. When it comes to measuring completeness, Dricus Du Plessis earns a Fighter Index Composite Score of 8.1. His relentless pressure, athletic tools, and well-rounded offensive game have established him as one of the most complete middleweights in the sport. Kamaru Usman earns a Fighter Index Composite Score of 8.2. His exceptional technical foundation and remarkable balance across all 16 skills give him the narrowest of advantages, making him the more complete fighter according to the Fighter Index. With the composite scores complete, the next question becomes even more important. How can each fighter actually win this matchup? Let's take a look at each fighter's path to victory. This segment identifies the conditions, strategies, and moments each fighter needs to create to give themselves the best chance to victory. Dricus Du Plessis' path to victory is built around dragging Kamaru Usman into the kind of exhausting physical fight where he thrives. He needs to pressure from the opening bell, forcing Usman to defend strikes, clinch exchanges, and takedown attempts without allowing him to settle into his preferred rhythm. Du Plessis' 9 in athleticism and 9 in resolve give him the physical tools and relentless mentality to sustain that pressure for as long as the fight lasts. Once Usman is reacting instead of dictating, Du Plessis needs to blend every phase of his offense together. His 8 in striking, 8 in clinch, and 8 in takedown offense allow him to constantly change the questions he's asking, making it difficult for Usman to anticipate what's coming next. The goal is to create a relentless cycle of offense that gradually wears Usman down both physically and mentally. If Du Plessis can force that kind of attritional battle, the fight begins to favor the style that made him a champion. The longer he can keep Usman defending and reacting, the more likely he is to create the kind of openings needed to take control of the fight. Kamaru Usman's path to victory is built around denying Dricus Du Plessis the type of fight that made him a champion. He needs to keep the fight structured, limit extended exchanges, and dictate where the action takes place. His 9 in fight IQ should allow him to make smart decisions throughout the fight, while his 8 in striking and 8 in striking defense help him manage distance and avoid the chaotic exchanges where Du Plessis thrives. When opportunities present themselves, Usman needs to lean on the skills that have defined his career. His 9 in wrestling, 9 in clinch, 9 in top control, and rare 10 in takedown defense give him the tools to determine where this fight is fought. Whether it's forcing clinch exchanges, securing takedowns, or denying Dricus' wrestling altogether, the goal is to keep Du Plessis from building the relentless momentum that fuels his offense. If Usman can consistently dictate the pace, force Dricus to fight a disciplined technical battle, and prevent the fight from becoming a grueling war of attrition, he'll maximize his chances of pulling off the upset at middleweight. We've examined the archetypes, operating systems, strengths, weaknesses, and skill matrix. Now it's time to answer the biggest question of all: who wins this fight? The Fighter Index answers a different question than the composite score. While the composite score measures who's the more complete fighter overall, the verdict weighs the matchup itself by considering the skill scores, paths to victory, and the intangibles that can influence the outcome. After weighing all these factors, my Fighter Index verdict is that Dricus Du Plessis wins this fight. At first glance, it may seem surprising because Kamaru Usman actually holds the advantage in 3 of the 4 Fighter Index pillars, owns a slightly higher composite score, reinforcing just how technically complete he is as a mixed martial artist. However, the Fighter Index isn't decided just by counting pillars, it's decided by determining which fighter is more likely to successfully implement their game plan in this specific matchup. Ultimately, the intangibles are what separate these two. Du Plessis is 7 years younger, carries significantly less championship mileage, and has spent years competing against elite middleweights, and is likely to be the naturally larger fighter when both men step into the cage on fight night. Those advantages become increasingly meaningful over the course of a 5-round fight built around relentless pressure and physicality. It's also worth noting that Usman pushed Khamzat Chimaev to a majority decision, while Chimaev went on to dominate Du Plessis, winning the middleweight title. Although MMA math is rarely a reliable predictor, it does reinforce just how competitive this matchup is and why Usman should never be underestimated. But in the end, I believe that Dricus Du Plessis is better positioned to implement his game plan than Kamaru Usman is to implement his. And that is why my Fighter Index verdict is Dricus Du Plessis. And that is the full Fighter Index breakdown for Dricus Du Plessis versus Kamaru Usman. The Fighter Index is designed to evolve as fighters evolve, and community discussion plays an important role in that process. So if there's a skill score, an operating system, path to victory, or a verdict that you see differently, let me know in the comments and explain how you would score the matchup. Do you agree that Dricus Du Plessis' relentless pressure, physicality, and pace are enough to overcome Kamaru Usman's technical completeness? Or do you think Usman's wrestling, fight IQ, and championship experience can keep the fight under control and earn him the biggest middleweight win of his career? Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more Fighter Index analysis. Catch you on the next one.